Several different state agencies also came together this past week to help the town of Bering, Missouri climb towards a new normal. Following the destructive tornado back in August, much of the town's tree canopy on the northeast side was lost. To help rebuild that canopy, the Missouri Department of Conservation and Forest Relief of Missouri teamed up to provide the town with new trees in the downtown park. Foresters say there are several benefits to bringing back the trees.
They had a lot of big old trees in their town that were lost in the tornado, and those trees provided a lot of shade. They help buffer the town from the impacts of storms. They help filter water.
The trees were provided free of charge, with Forest Relief even hauling them up to northeast Missouri to be planted.